full of MDMA.
Does it taste like shit? Honestly, does it
I
kind
mean,
of?
it's got like it's hard to disguise that.
No.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 38 of The Treat Show. I am so excited for the show tonight because it is our 1-year anniversary, and I apologize for missing last week's show between construction and the storm. Gosh, we're off to a smooth start. Anyways, so I've got Andrew Hatch in the studio tonight, and we're actually going to be having a really productive conversation. So let's bring Andrew in right now.
Hello.
Andrew, how are you doing tonight?
So far, so good. No fires, no explosions. Doing all right.
That's what I like to hear. I feel like sometimes it's not smooth. You know, Monday through Friday, I feel like it's never smooth. Sometimes you can score it on a Sunday.
Sometimes.
Anyways, all right. So I'm not going to dive in because these conversations are going to be so stimulating tonight. I feel like before we get too crazy, let's just talk about your week. We need an update of your life, Andrew.
I wasn't aware that was the subject matter for tonight. First I was bored, then I was less bored, and then I was bored again. No.
That's hilarious.
No, I'm just, I'm working on making some content for some people as far as other horticultural products than cannabis. And I don't know. I've been talking to people about, basically the industry and, am I going to fit in there anymore? Am I going to try to?
The cannabis industry.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's where I messed up our last time that I got to chill with you, is because you touched on so many important things that I'm super passionate about. And I don't know why I skipped over some of the things that you mentioned, because I think a lot of guys out there are struggling with staying in the industry first and foremost for all kinds of reasons. But I think with you particularly is you had an opportunity to work with somebody that we won't say their names or I won't say any of this stuff, but I'll say that they're very high up on the food chain, and it's a very big corporate cannabis company, supplier, let's say.
Can you tell us what it rhymes with?
I love it.
I'm just kidding.
And I feel like, because to me, a lot of people would be striving for these positions, right? Like, I think if you start as like a trimmer or a bud tender or something, from my experience, is you're thirsty if you want to stay in this as a career, is you're like, how can I get to the top of something? Whether that be owning it, whether that be a manager or a director of operations, or your own niche in pest and disease eradication, or some of these different outlets. But I think because you've actually been at the top of multiple avenues of this, like in
It's true.
different kind of infrastructure or different, like from native roots and working with a company that large, honestly, and a facility that large, to working with a supply group that's just as big as native roots for what they're doing or manufacturing, or,
Yeah.
What has been your honest experience? I feel like there's not a lot of people that can be transparent about this. Andrew, you're my guy.
Well, first of all, I really liked working in native roots. It was great. I had a lot of latitude as far as what I did. I kind of got ADD, and so I want to, do everything. And so I'm happiest when I can jump from thing to thing to thing to thing, because I don't have the attention span for just one. And so, it was actually the most fun job I've ever had.
Wow.
Yeah, because I could be a jackass like my normal self without having to worry about who I was gonna worry.
I feel like, there's a thing with like really intelligent people that I think really struggle career wise at times as well, though, is like ADHD, how you mentioned this, is like, I feel like sometimes it's just that you have so much, I think, that you understand in a field, and I think that this can be a battle big time when you're used to writing SOPs and you're used to creating these formulas for like a large operation or vast group of employees. It's not just like, 10 people or something. Is you're thinking about things so ahead in the future that I think it's difficult because you almost can get overloaded so fast because you understand all of these like nitpicky things that nobody else in the room probably comprehends.
Yeah, it can be difficult to. Well, I learned early on that you have to put everything in terms of revenue,
Oh, I
right?
love that.
I was like, because it's science and it's cool and it's like shit that's never been done, and people are like, yeah, I've got another meeting like in 20 minutes, and how's this impact the bottom line? And so
Yeah.
I started having to like diagram it out. In my lab, we had when we were just getting started, we had whiteboards everywhere, like on the walls. So that
Like
we could
covering
just,
the whole room.
yeah, well, we had at least like 10,
Dang.
because it was a pretty big lab. And so basically I would just diagram out that stuff like a flow chart,
Oh, nice.
and say like this it goes to this and this goes to this. And then down here it goes to, risk management, like, and then you got crop protection, liability, and other shit coming out from that.
Yeah.
And, increasing revenue or decreasing loss, so you had to like kind of package it all before you went into the meeting, right?
Yeah.
And that you would think that's like intuitive, but like for me, I've been working with scientists and like we're hyper nerds and focused in on something rather small.
Yeah, probably. I think that those were your multiple projects and things like that I can relate to that definitely, where you, I think, are, say, writing something that's very in depth or like very thorough, to say the least, on a specific topic. But then you probably have 4 other jobs or 4 other things that stem from that original place that you kind of have to manage and sort at the same time.
Yep. Like every question like provides like 3 more questions, right?
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
you can kind of get, going down a rabbit hole, you find those rabbit holes branch, right? And then you
Yeah.
have to try to figure out which one of those is the most lucrative, which one is the most important to daily operations. Yeah.
Well, and I think we're just going to dive into this now that you led with this beautiful conversation, Andrew, because I really want to talk about investments and investors this evening in cannabis, like probably more specifically tonight, just on like, I see a lot of these entrepreneurs like coming out from all these different states that are either ready to start a smoke lounge or a dispensary, or, they have something going on. A music festival, it seems like all kinds of things. But I see that there's a lot of misinformation, kind of, or no information when it comes to people really trying to pursue this, or like even having an idea of how much money is it going to take and what is a fair kind of ownership split. You know what I mean? Like,
Totally, yeah.
people always say 50-50, but anybody that really does these deals or does business, like, it's never 50-50. Even that within itself is 49-51.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, you got to have 51 and retain it, like if you want to retain control. And so,
Yes.
like, I found that bridging the gap between, what the person trying to sell the investment and the person that is actually providing capital for the investment.
Yes.
The person that's trying to get the investment capital is under pressure to say what they're going to produce and what the revenue is going to look like. But it's really hard to know before you've built your facility and
Yeah.
before you've tested your strains and all that stuff. It's really hard to know what's actually going to happen, right? And so a lot of it is just kind of, unfortunately, wishful thinking, you
Yes.
know? And sometimes people do better than they think, but typically people project on the, the higher than lower side. And then you've got a lot of the time investors that don't know the industry, right? And so I had this one guy call me up, and like he had a lot of capital to throw around. He was
Nice.
like, "I need a master grower," and I'm like, "Well, I have yet to see a curriculum for a master grower or a certificate." And I know
I've seen a
people that are-
lighter.
right?
Sorry.
On the lighter side. So, yeah, I'm not trying to denigrate anybody or like, talk shit, even though I love talking shit.
We gotta talk shit
I-
sometimes.
I like talking shit as long as it's not like hurtful. I like just kind of pointing out things.
You're
you
not
know
a
what I mean?
malicious shit talker.
No, I'm not a malicious shit talker.
That's good.
Unless I hate you.
Yeah. Look
Then-
out.
But there's only a couple people in the world that I hate. So, literally
Cheers
two.
to that.
Yeah, and so Basically, you've got this chain. Like you've got the investor, then you've got the person that's the CEO or whatever they are,
Yep.
and then you've got the person that knows how to grow the weed a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Not often the CEO is somebody that actually knows how to grow the weed,
Yeah.
but not always, right? And then you've got this guy down the chain who's got all the pressure that's come down the chain, right?
Yeah.
And he's got employees, and then it just kind of gets farther and farther away from those initial projections. I read this book War and Peace, and it was a fucking long read, and I read a bad translation of it. And I read like 15 other books while I was reading that because it was so
Wow.
fucking dry. But like the one of the takeaways is that like no plan kind of survives first contact with the enemy, right? Like
I
you
like
can come
that.
up with ideas before you get on the battlefield, but once fighting starts, it's kind of all bets are off, right?
Yeah.
And one of the points was that there are people that get a reputation for being great men, great generals,
Yeah.
but it's not necessarily their fault. You know what I
That's a
mean?
really good. Yeah.
Because there's a lot of luck involved, right? And so it's kind of similar to venture capital, right? Like you've got people that are investing in a bunch of things, hoping that one pans out.
Yes.
And often they don't have a lot of time. They just are like, where's the money, right?
I've had that happen. I'm just glad that you said that as well. Is I've had this happen twice in working with investors myself. Is that when we were going to pursue moving forward on a dispensary or a grow or whatever, is they went through and their other investments failed at the same time that we would be ready to close on ours, and so they'd back out.
Yep.
They'd be like, "Fuck this!" Like a year later or whatever into it.
Yeah.
Like they're just like, "Nope."
And
changed
you've
my
already
mind.
lined up like service partners and like
You already have attorneys
Yep.
and like whoever you're going to purchase the license from or the buildings, everybody's kind of already vested at that point. And it's devastating. It's devastating not only to like, obviously, if you're pursuing this, it hurts a little, but I feel like you get used to
A
it. But I feel like the thing is like the other staffs, like you said, or it's not even the staff, but like this situation, we were going to buy, I call it the penthouse, it was a grow one time that I was really excited about, like real excited. And it was a mutual friend that was like the real estate agent that even was listing this place. They had called somebody up. Basically, we all got put together, and I didn't know this investor. So I will say this company because I hate them. And so
oh, the shit talking starts.
exactly.
Everybody gets your popcorn.
That's what I'm talking. So Servpro, Servpro is a very, very large corporation, and a lot of people don't know what Servpro does or is. But they go into houses like after a flood or a fire or something like that, like a hurricane.
Yeah.
And they go in and they're the people that basically go to your insurance. They're the dirtiest hustler of them all. They like, they're like,
Not to put too fine a point on it, right?
exactly. Is they go into these places and they test everything for like mold and different problems that came from these storms, and so they'll basically broker out the insurance job. They submit how much this job is going to cost, and then you can choose who your contractor or whatever is. But anyways, this company is a multi-billion-dollar company, and insane. So when I had acquired them as investors, I was really excited, right? And at the time I was reaching for $10 million is like for this plan of pursuing this grow and this dispensary. And we were looking at all kinds of things in the market, but when we found this little friend deal and blah, blah, blah. So anyways, we go through, I don't know this guy. We pretend like we know each other, like walking through this grow. It's the
Yeah.
most weird, like we're like, hi. And
Hey, how have you been?
Yeah.
I see you still wear shoes.
exactly. And we like actually hit it off and we're like, okay, we're going to do this. So we spend this year going through all this shit, and the penthouse is like relying on us now at this point. Like they've taken it off the market. We have attorneys like writing up these contracts. We found a dispensary, Lucy Sky. It's funny, it got purchased by Lightshade. And it's just amazing though how this circle. So Lucy Sky was for sale for a pretty reasonable amount at the time. It was really expensive. It was, to me, it was 600 square foot. Was the total square footage. So a pretty small retail store, right? And there was no wheelchair access or some of these things that you'd want as a cannabis dispensary, period, I think. And so it was on the top floor of something like I don't know. It wasn't great, but we were like, okay, it's 1.2 that they're asking for. So we're like, you're not going to find a license for cheaper than $1 million in Colorado when there's a moratorium on the licenses. And this is like prior to any social equity or any weird things that they've done now. So anyways, we go through. And these guys end up calling me because of this hurricane. So they call me and they're like, Jay, and I'll always remember it was like really close to my birthday. And for some reason, you know how we get sensitive when things fail around our birthdays? Has that ever happened to you? Maybe
No,
it's a girl
I
thing.
usually like have to be reminded it's my birthday.
Dang.
Like I don't.
Oh my gosh, the
I
older
don't
you
pay
get as
that
a
much
woman, you're
attention.
just like devastated already.
You calling me a woman?
Just kidding.
It's not like it's a
just
bad
kidding.
thing.
So-
Always wanted to be pretty.
So we go through, anyways, he calls me like around my birthday and I'm like, fuck everybody, I'm not going out. This guy, like, he's like, they back out of everything. And we're supposed to get the keys and like finalize all this stuff this week. And I'm the person that's in Colorado. They're coming in from out of state, right? Like they're coming in for these meetings. Like I'm working with my brokers and my attorney and all my resources. And so our investment, this is my biggest point, sorry.
No, you're good.
So our arrangement is we were going to be 49-51. And so the deal is they were going to be 51% because I was getting this $10 million. And I'll explain a little bit about the $10 million. But so I really needed 5. I was like, I really need 5. This is how this is going down.
The other 5 was like
It's a
for your
buffer.
house, right?
It's a
Like,
pretty good
no.
buffer, you know? I was like, we're going to probably have a shit hit the fan in the first 3 years, and we're probably going to have like construction problems. We're probably going to have permit problems, expenses
smart.
that you don't expect. Yeah, so all this shit that you're like, I need double whatever I really need. And I've always put that in my mind, pursuing my own thing, honestly. And so I was like sitting with these guys. Honestly, I was like 27 years old at the time. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm taking on potentially $10 million, right? In your mind, because that's the way you should be looking at this. And so you're like, I have to pay back this $10 million. And how long is this going to take? And this was probably around 2016 or 2017. And so the market wasn't great, right? Like it wasn't super spicy anymore. It's starting to take a decline. And so I was
remember that time.
yeah, and I was like, man, the lowest margins I'll go to, and blah, blah, blah. I'll have the security blanket, right? So they agree to this funding, whatever, in this 49-51. And so when we come to the actual arrangement, though, of closing this deal, they start slowly changing things where they're like, okay, Jay, we're going to bring in this accountant, and she's going to oversee all the budget and the money and all that. And I'm like, if you think I'm paying you back $10 million and you're choosing my accountant, like, sadly mistaken. Let's start there. So, so then second, they tell me, they're like, okay, you're going to buy back into this percentage, right? Because our original arrangement was if I'm a consultant and I'm setting up this business plan and it's my business that I'm going to be running this and doing this every day, and this is my brand, you know, I was like, this is where my 49% comes in. And so they go through it. They're like, Jay, we'll start you at 13%. And this is like when we're actually supposed to get, you know, the keys, like a week's out kind of thing. And so he's like, we'll give you 13%. You'll pay back from the first crop X amount, and you'll buy into these percentages, right? Mm-hmm. And then you'll pay 20% interest over the terms of these 5 years.
That's like credit card interest. That's
pretty insane for fucking $5 million. And giving somebody 51% of a company I fully have to pay back, and I have to risk, like, so this is like weird. So my first reply to him was like, fuck you, basically. But I was like, dude, if you got aphids alone, like, this is just being real, but if you got a bug infestation, or if you got fusarium, or if you had HLVD, or any of these things are going to happen, is you have something take out your crop, right? Like, I can't guarantee I'm going to pay you back quarterly $500,000 roughly, and cover my overhead and develop my brand and have money to be able to actually take care of my staff, actually market myself, actually, you know what I mean? Like, it's not buying Gucci shit. Like, people that flex on this shit in the weed industry, I'm like, you fucking idiot. Like, it's like, I just want security with, like, you know, a steady paycheck just like everybody else. I'm like, I need this to take care of me, but I'll show up and do this for 7 days a week and however many hours, and, you know, you're down. But you realize these people are very detached from it, very, very detached. And he found every way to hustle me because he knew I had this dream, and they knew that I had the money. And so when it changed all these margins and all these percentages, basically it would take. So the flaw there is if I see where they're trying to put this accountability on you to be like, guarantee you're going to put, you want to get paid back now, right? Or you want this to work now because you'll get the percentage faster in theory. But the thing is they could sell it, right? Because I'm only 13%, unless I specified in the most ridiculous ways with an attorney, and probably you'd still get screwed, is they could decide to have me build it out, build this infrastructure, which is probably what would happen. And I would train somebody, right? And they would take whoever my right-hand woman or man is they would take them eventually, probably 2 years later at best, and they would fire me and take the license and take all this shit.
You set everything up.
Because you set everything up and now you're rolling. And now they have this brand and they don't think you have value, right? They think anybody can grow weed. Anybody can do this shit.
A lot, like people are like, when I was selling services as far as like microbiology, like disease management, protecting people from liability, like, I was talking on a call with a very large grow, and the owner looked at their like safety guy and was like, "Why can't you just do this stuff?" I was like, like it requires somebody that's actually studied it, right? You can't just do it on the fly, and it's just like trying to replace, somebody that's been growing for 20 years with somebody that's been growing for a year, and just, you pay them and say, just get it done, right? But it doesn't really work like that. When you're dealing with organisms, they kind of do their own shit sometimes, and like you can't necessarily meet hard numbers, right? Especially if they're optimistic numbers.
Absolutely. I think the thing that we touched on last time was these investors and these owners want to see these rooms filled no matter what. And no matter what. And so when you look at that obstacle, like if I wanted to hustle somebody, like this is weird, but as a lighter example, is I had a different investor that was going to write me a $500,000 check one day. And I was going to him for $1 million. And it was cheaper at the time to get a license and to do all this. So anyways, he was like, Jay, I can give you the $500,000 right now and let's do this. And I was like, he was going to give me 51%. It was amazing, like kind of unheard of. But he said I had to hire his like metric people and hire his staff and do all this shit right off the bat once again. And I was like, dude, it's not that you don't like people or like what your business is or like, but it's like, once again, I'm not going to pay for something that's not mine, right? Like I'll respect yours, but like, I'm not going to, no. And so I think that, to me, it's because I see these guys, though, honestly, it's because I see them make the same repetitive mistakes. Is like working from the ground up in this industry, honestly, and working in all these different positions. And I think this same thing is like, once you see all this, is like, I won't bullshit a guy for the $500,000. I'm not going to take his $500,000 and go fuck around for a year and like go waste his time. It's like, excuse me, as I see a lot of people have done that and they've like sabotaged those types of relationships as well, or trust with investors.
Yeah.
But I looked at the guy and was like, dude, I need $1 million. Like, you're giving me half of what I need. Like, I'm not going to take half and get fucked or fuck you.
Right.
Like,
without a buffer. I mean, I'm glad you brought up the idea of a buffer. I've seen a lot of people be like, all right, we just need to fundraise this amount and that'll get us through like setup. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And then the money's going to come rolling in, and it's not always a safe bet.
And you have to be so disciplined. I think the scary part and the thing that we all have our best intentions with is you're like, I'm never going to like spend wrong. I'm never going to, if I achieve this, I'm never going to not pay my bills. I'm never going to cut corners with my employees, or I don't know. We all have these great aspirations, but I feel like that gets wonky too, is you see a lot of these owners that I've helped out, like they have hit trying times. Like not all of them at all. Like some of these guys have been phenomenal. And like I wanted to work with them because they were great at what they do. But it's like some of these guys like had to grow into their brands and grow into their companies. And I don't know, like those first 3 years, it's weird, is I think that you're going to be the most successful, like most times it's weird. Like as far as a grow goes, like it's usually clean, it's usually built out, like brand new, some of these like things. But then after like that 3 year mark, I see all of them kind of hit this like, and like the market changes and all these fluctuations.
Yeah, and then you've got, equipment that's like just starting to break down some of it.
Yeah.
And if you had those optimistic projections like we were talking about, you can end up kind of upside down pretty quick, because you've got kind of that decline, and then things just sort of cascade off of that. It's like a snowball rolling down a hill. You have one thing break down, then you've got to reallocate employees, and then another thing starts happening, right?
Yeah.
And then sometimes reality intrudes on the situation that was on a spreadsheet, right? Like that was all pretty.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you end up just having this massive kind of problem. And, people lose companies over this, like for sure.
And it's so much money. Like the sad part to me is like I've had a lot of people that I don't like in like I'm saying in this industry and in this business for sure. And I've seen them go out of business. And the thing is like you're sad. Like even though I can have whatever feeling about whatever drama, is I'm devastated when I see it happen though. Is because I know no matter what, you spent a lot of money on this. And like you spent a lot of your time, and like a lot of people think that investors are like pieces of shit. Like honestly, as I hear it all the time, is like these rich people, or like we have a lot of doctors that invest in this industry, or a lot of just medical. Honestly, most investors I've met in cannabis are all medical backgrounds or real estate. Like, I don't know, common pattern I've seen, but
Yeah, I've seen a lot of the real estate for sure.
yeah. And I think that they, honestly, the person that we worked mutually for is probably the only doctor now that I think about this, or like a background like that. But I think I don't know, I just think that they're so detached in a way of the business sometimes that it's difficult. But I also look at them where I'm like, it is a lot of money and it is a lot of risk putting on somebody. And anytime I see an investor really take that leap for somebody, I admire it so much, because I've been on both, like, no, not both ends. I've been with, like, I wish I was on the other end sometimes. Right. But, like, I feel like I've worked with probably 30 different investors pursuing the same thing, and my vision has never changed. My pursuit has never changed. Like, that's why I'm a consultant, was because I was like, I'm not going to spend $10 million or $5 million on something and not guarantee myself. Like, guarantee myself, like ego and all that shit aside, it's like, I'm not going to start a weed brand because it's cool. If you're telling me that I have to pay in Denver, Colorado, if I have to pay premium square footage prices, this is where this shit gets weird. So if it costs like $2.5 million to buy a retail store in Colorado, licensed, turnkey, granted, and say it's a decent store. It's probably in a shithole because they're all zoned in shitholes. But I feel like, say it's probably like a nice store. It's a decent, cleaned up, whatever, renovated store. Is $2.5 million in downtown Denver. I'm like, who the fuck else is paying that for per square foot, right? Yeah. So then I'm like, fuck Colorado, just go to Beverly Hills at this point. Like, go to New York, go to these prime real estate places, because I'm like, I would never pay, as a business, like, logical person, honestly. I would still look at things in the grand scheme of business. Is like, why would you invest into anything that they just get absurd with pricing? Yeah. Like, where this is just ridiculous. It's like, you want to come back down to earth and, like, put me strip clubs, casinos, all these other people, like tanning salons even, like all the bad things, right? They all pay the same tax, though. They all pay the same bad tax rate. And it's like a third of ours. So I'm like, dude, like, when is everybody else gonna, like, I don't want to pay 30% for an eighth of weed. And like, why the fuck would I promote customers going to a store, honestly, if that's how the state is looking at this? Like, we're past rec, right? We were the first state. I'm proud of us. And I think we got used and abused, but we did it. But it's like, we're past that phase. So it's like, we're not making those margins. We're not moving that weed. And so I feel like we have a lot of competition. It's like, everybody needs to be voting again on fucking weed coming down. And all these states that keep doing the same shit, is it doesn't make sense for the investor. It doesn't make sense for the grower. It doesn't make sense for anybody. If you're paying for testing, you're paying premium real estate, you're paying all this shit, and then your customer's coming to you and they're like, I'll pay $10 an eighth. Yeah. You're like, sweet. Like, is it sparkly? Fuck no. Not at those prices. Like, I'm rubbing that shit in the dirt. Oh, sorry. That's how I feel about it.
Let's talk about product safety next.
That's what I'm talking about. I feel like, I don't know, Andrew, I just feel like you've been hurt in the same ways in this industry, where you probably had your pay fluctuate dramatically. And honestly, I bet the more that you got educated in this niche and the further you like put more time into it, I bet you got paid less and less every time you did that. And I mean,
to some degree, yeah, because you know, the more specialized you get, the harder it is to sell services because it's harder to communicate the
your
value,
service.
right? Like because you're talking to people that don't necessarily understand the problems. You know, the people that are actually seeing those problems are like the growers and like the grow managers, right? Like they're
Definitely.
the ones that really understand a lot of what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And but they don't have the money to pay you, right? And so you have to go and kind of glad hand and like, talk to people and be like, hey, this is my 30-second spiel or whatever. And they're like, yeah, I didn't understand that. You know what I mean? I'm going to move on to the next
It's so
thing.
true. That value, I think, is getting lost or diluted in some ways, at least in Colorado. I really do feel like we got gypped in some ways because I think the people that really started in the beginning, and I mean like the first 6 years, 7 years, like it was such an uncomfortable time and it was such a risky time that like those people, I don't know, I'm grateful for the experience for all of us that'll be like its own thing forever, that whatever. But there's really no respect or like money like that really comes from that. And I only say this because I want to be real with people because I hear so many people pursuing this industry and like pursuing this as a long-term stability to create a family and to like do all this shit. And to be honest, I would tell everybody to not do that at this time.
Yeah.
I'm not saying ever, but I would just strongly advise not doing that right now. If I could go back, I started in this industry commercially when I was 18, 19 years old. And honestly, I feel so, it's not that I regret it. It's not. But it's just like when I look back with hindsight, I'm like, you could have done things easier. Like you could have just like chose something
But
that.
what about your personal growth, right? Like I don't fucking grow much unless I'm in intense pain. You know what I
That's
mean?
a really good point.
Maybe I'm just a hardhead, but like
Maybe that's what it is.
my friend walked up to me one day and he's like, "Jesus, what's wrong with you?" You know, and I was like, "I'm growing." You know?
I'm changing. That's hilarious. I always tell people, when you start crying when you say your positive affirmations in the mirror, and you're like, "I'm so happy." It's like,
I'm good enough. I'm smart enough.
it's
God
like
darn it,
that's when
people
you
like
need to
me.
walk away from
Yeah.
the industry. I don't know, but I think hearing you though is like, I don't know, I think your experience is powerful because I think that you're so beyond, like you said, intellectually and like the understanding of.
I don't want to live up to that.
No pressure. It's like the just like the pest and disease is protocols that you like, standardization that you've made and implemented, like truly though, is like those are the things that secure people's businesses.
Yeah.
Like for cannabis, and that's why like you want to know this if you're doing this, is I feel like that's your biggest detriment. Like you can handle some financial shit, but like when it comes to your crop though, is you can't have things happen to your crop.
Yeah. And I see corners get cut, that affect the crop downstream.
Yes.
And like I've actually seen this in like outside industries, like outside business,
Let's talk about it.
I worked as a low-level corporate drone for a few years, and I was just like the movie Office Space, only it wasn't funny. I say this a lot. Anyway, and one day they got the brilliant idea to fire all of the administrative assistants except one per floor, and it was a very large company with 3,000 people on site, right?
Wow.
It was funny because the administrative assistants were the ones that actually knew what was going on, like, and how to like solve all the problems, right? And as soon as they did that, then there was one that was like overloaded instead of like 5, and it looked good for the quarter because they were able to cut those paychecks out. But what happened was then their efficiency went right, because like then there's all these people bombarding this one person who's like, Jesus, just kill me, and then often people will leave those jobs and then they have to start over and like train all these people, right, like to figure it out. Like I remember a company I worked for, they had won the contract to do the specific thing, right? And then they couldn't go back to the people they had gotten the contract from, right? And say, okay, now how did you guys do it? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so I came on board, and within 3 weeks, I was the senior person in the department because everybody was like, okay, there's a warm body. I'm getting the hell out of here, right?
Wow.
And so then I just had to kind of like do it all, figure it out from the ground up. And, the downturn you have in productivity and efficiency and, all things that impact the bottom line, like, is enormous when you have to start over, right? And
Yeah.
so I see a lot of companies just going for like, what's good for this quarter, right? Like,
You're absolutely right.
but in the long term, like you have to have all your bases covered for the long term. Like short term gains, like don't really mean a hell of a lot if you're out of business the next quarter, right?
Absolutely. And understanding those pressures of like the amount of overhead that these companies have or these infrastructures as a whole is like a retail store, no matter what you're really working with, I'd say an average is about 100 grand a month to like run the store with
Yeah.
like purchasing shit, your employees, like all the stuff. And that's without your grow, right? And that's without you being vertically integrated, which is like what we're all trying to achieve if you're in this business, but most people aren't. So both ways is they either are purchasing wholesale and they're moving a lot of weed and that's hard to maintain. Like, and then I don't know, or they'll tank like the wholesale market too, where they'll get it as low as
Yeah.
possible because they don't know that side.
Yeah.
But then everybody that has a grow wants a store, but I don't know. It's like between the two though, it's like that's when it gets real expensive. You got 150 grand or something that you got to come up with every 4 weeks. That's really the truth. It's like,
Yep.
how many of us can do that? Like,
I kind of feel like we need to move beyond the vertical integration, right? Because it's not really, it doesn't really incentivize like growing really high quality cannabis, right? So
absolutely.
when you've got a bunch of different wholesalers that you can choose from, you can actually, they are actually very competitive with each other.
Yeah.
And like they're under pressure to produce high quality product. Whereas if you're vertically integrated, you got to worry about the whole package, right? And it's
whole
very
thing.
hard to do all of the things like in any industry, right?
Absolutely.
And so like I've seen a lot of companies kind of suffer. I've seen a lot of companies like have to shut down parts of their grow or shut down entire facilities just because they wanted to do it all, all of the things.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like I was saying, the wholesale market, that really drives improvement, right? And,
Yeah.
well, one would hope, right? Because you've got a bunch of people trying to fight for
Healthy
those
competition.
contracts. Yeah.
You're absolutely right though, because you need your wholesalers to care. But you need your owners from these stores to really care too. Is sometimes I think that these owners get comfortable like seeing whoever their friend or whatever brand that they've worked with for a long time. Say they have like a bad crop come through and they're like, I'm paying you $600 a pound. Let's just say paying you $600 a pound of Tropicana cookies, and this other guy has it for $400 a pound, and it's way better than yours. So I see this happen where they'll go take the $400 a pound, and then that relationship will burn, whatever this like, thing was. And it doesn't matter how many years they work together. It doesn't matter anything. And so they'll jump to this like cheaper pound and whatever. Instead of being an asshole, honestly, it's like maybe being like, dude, would you take off a couple $100 and I'll stick it out with you and I'll see a couple more crops if like you're really trooping through, like, or if, you know what I mean? Like this inconsistency. Sometimes I see people burn relationships for no reason. It's like you said, this is a living plant. Like,
Yeah.
like all of us try our very
Sometimes it's not, and then there's a problem, right?
yeah, it can be a hell of a week sometimes. And like, we hit these obstacles that nobody really wants to talk about or post on Instagram, right? Like even small shit, like your reservoir is overflowing and like, PM in the like rooms, like too late or aphids or russet mites or
Oh God.
infestations happen so late in the summer in these rooms sometimes that like you'll have everything eradicated and then you'll hit week 5 and something will come in on somebody's shoes and you're fucked. Like, and you're just like, awesome. Like I have to come up with 50 grand and I have no weed or I have no product or, I think I think it can be. I just wish it was healthy, or there was a healthy way that we could come together as a community to like post weed for reals. Like instead of the filters, instead of these like photo shoots of nugs, like it's just I appreciate those. I really do. But
Like you don't like the 360-degree fucking
slow-mo?
Yeah, totally. Like
I'm like, look at her drip.
yeah, it's sprayed with fucking hairspray or something. You
Yeah,
know?
exactly. It's probably baked in some fucking machine for like I don't know. It's like it's not that I don't appreciate. I love marketing. I love branding. I
Yeah.
appreciate good flower, obviously. But I'm like, dude, let's cut the bullshit. Like I want to see your grow, right? Like if you're showing me that weed, show me what room it came out of. Show me the plants right next to it. Show me like all the shit. You know what I mean? And it's like nobody's doing that.
Yeah, and show me a track record. Like
Consistency.
yeah, for sure. Because like if you see it fluctuate a lot, like in their pounds per light, right? Like it's probably not a good long term investment.
Your staff. I think the weed industry doesn't pay well. Like, I'll just be real about it.
No.
It's like it doesn't pay well at all. And like so when I look at it, it's like you need to care so much though. Like you need you can't there's not a lot of room for error in these home grows or commercially. Like you can't skip your plants just because you're partying on the weekend and be like, oh, I'm not gonna water today. It's like good luck on Monday. Like, no, it's like you'll lose shit that you can never get back, or you'll kill a room that's like at week 5 by being like, oh, I went too hard on Friday. Like, I don't know. It's like when you it's sad to me because these people should be compensated so well. But the reason that they're not isn't as personal as these people think either. Is like their companies can't afford to do it.
Yeah.
But if we can raise the quality and we can raise the price again across the board to take care of people, honestly, I think it'll be good. But we need those people to make more money too. That's the sad reality of the current times.
Yeah, and what I've seen a lot of grows do is like have a ton of people on staff at low pay.
Yeah.
But you can actually get more out of it if you treat your employees well and you have just fewer people on staff, right?
I love that.
Because when there's a bunch of people on staff, and they run out of work, they're just going to sit there telling jokes or like doing whatever.
Plants do better, I think, too, with like skeleton crews is what I like to call them, even though that's probably not. It's a little different.
You're working people to death here, right?
Yeah, exactly. But they like it though. It's like the plants themselves, like you said, when a manager or somebody that really genuinely cares, like from any position, honestly, is like there's just this amount of attention to detail that goes into everything. Like, just I think that people recognize when a leaf like starts to look different, or when their plants start to go from velvet to a little bit harder. They're like, what is this?
Yeah.
And these feedings, and I don't know, it's like the more people care, is the weed does really reflect it. And I think that's where those teams, it's the biggest challenge I've ever seen with cannabis. Is like you said, the more employees you have, it's almost, I don't want to say impossible. It's just real difficult. It's like versus if you have a couple employees that have grows at their house, but they're competent on keeping their plants healthy, then it's like you don't care. But it's like most times you got people growing at home with like 50 to 100 employees minimum per these buildings. You've got shit from outside. You've got, even if people are changing out or whatever, you're still running into these obstacles of like, how do you let them go into a room? Like,
yeah, for sure. Like, and also just like looking at it from, a mechanical sort of standpoint, it's like the more employees you've got doing the same job, right, the more points of failure you essentially have, right?
Yeah.
It's like any machine, right? If you've got it's a machine that's overly complex, right? It's got more points of failure, and so you're going to run into more problems, more inconsistency. And so when you've got a smaller crew that's really competent, now I'm not saying like you need to like work people to fucking death, because that sucks, and then you're going to lose people, and the plants suffer, and the people suffer, which is super fucking important, because like I kind of like I identify more with the people that are doing the actual growing. You know
Absolutely,
what I mean?
yeah.
And so like being able to have those fewer people, they're going to be more in touch with the plants, right? They're going to know their strains. They're going to know how to grow those strains, and they're going to see problems like before they're big problems.
yes.
But if you got like a whole bunch of people, and sometimes like, when you pay a whole bunch of people a kind of shit salary or wage or whatever,
Yeah.
you lose people all the time. and then you have that downturn in efficiency we're talking about.
Yeah, and then you got to keep that sparkle. I mean, like the truth is some of these jobs are so repetitive and they're not fun. Like when your garden actually gets an infestation of something, it's hard to go to work or it's hard to walk in it, like at your house, in your tent, anywhere.
Yeah.
It's hard to see it. You're just like, man. And so I think that that's when the plants almost get neglected like the most is like just what I see is like when people start losing confidence in like their crop, you know,
Yeah.
and their quality of their stuff is the thing with weed is like I think that we go too deep with it where we're like this is representative of everything this person is it's like no, it's like it's really sad when a person is like I have to sell something that I don't want to sell.
Yeah.
I've been in that position and I tell people, I'm like, listen, like, I'm going to give you a cheap as fuck price on this. like, because this is not primo and this is not my fave. But you want it to get repurposed.
Yeah.
Let's keep it recycled. Let's keep shit moving. like, you know.
But you got to offer the discount, right?
You got to offer the discount and
You
you
know?
got to say the problem.
Yeah, totally. And like we were talking about with vertical integration, like, you know, you're going to have quality fluctuations sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But you still have to get those same dollars out of that thing. So you don't have the latitude to say, you know what, this is a shitty cycle, right?
Absolutely. I think, God, I got to stop saying absolutely. It's like, you can tell when I start getting high. I'm sorry, Andrew.
It's
like,
all good.
I think that there's just like a weird pressure though that okay, these head growers, sorry, I was just these master growers I was just thinking about them there was a lot of crop incentives back in the day.
Yeah.
Like people don't really do that anymore, but there used to be like, you know, if I pull 20% more or 50% on it or whatever it was, it's like these people would get paid fat in theory. And so I would see these like systemic diseases coming through though. I would see these guys' crops go from like their owners taking genetics in from everywhere, right? They're like hitting up California every other day. They're like, give me the lemon tree, give me the like whatever.
And you're like,
at
why
the
is my whole
time.
crop seeded? Well, whoops.
Yeah, exactly. All kinds of shit. Or like covered in aphids. One time this guy, this was like funny, but he paid like $5,000 for this strain at the time that was popping. And it was covered in aphids. And I was like, dude, like, do you really gotta bring it here? Like, is that your first? Anyways, so
Quarantine procedures are extremely important.
Yeah.
Anybody listening, like, you know,
So-
like you want to have a quarantine, you want to have a set, you know, things that you dip it in, right?
Love
like,
this,
you know, I'm
Andrew.
not saying anything toxic, but
No.
like paracetic acid and hydrogen peroxide, like those things are great at getting rid of fungi. You know, because like you're gonna grow those plants and then you're going to clone off those plants and then you're going to clone off those clones. And so there's going to be a dilution of whatever you put on it initially, right? If you're starting with a really small batch.
Yeah.
And it's worth much more to go through the kind of the bullshit and the waiting that is involved in like proper quarantine and treatment. But if you don't, you're risking the entire crop that you have, like in your entire operation that you're trying to keep going, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's like super important and so classy how you put that. Thank you, Andrew.
Well, I do try to keep it classy. I fail most of the time.
So I sent Andrew this thing on a company called Culture Biologics. Everybody did you read anything on them?
No. Can you give me the 30-second?
I have nothing.
I mean, I did. I checked out the website, but I didn't go too in depth.
You didn't go crazy. So we'll come back to it in another episode.
Yeah, I'm like on air. Why don't you go ahead and break it down for me?
I don't know shit about this.
No, I actually, now that I recall, I looked. The products looked interesting. I didn't get to the point of like, you know, kind of dissecting them from what I know and like looking at the list of ingredients and like trying to figure out what each one did really, you know.
See, I have to see. That's why we have to come back to this is because I can't be biased on my. I can't be. You have to come to me and be on the next episode.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that. I'll come prepared this time.
I want everybody that is running Culture Biologics in the chat right now to let me know what you think about it. Okay, so we had one more thing I wanted to really bring up with you tonight I've been having, burning sulfur.
Mm-hmm.
So What do you think about it, Andrew?
Well, for what purpose?
Okay, that's awesome. is so
Because you like the smell? I mean,
yeah, that's exactly. It's like swamp me out, please. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you, and don't change your response because of this, but I love burning sulfur when my plants are really young. Is like say in the veg phase, like or I'm saying, sorry, I need to chill on this blunt. It's say right when I transplant them, honestly, like 3 days after a transplant from their clones, is I'll plug it in for, let's just say 4 to 6 hours. I have nothing going on. I'll put it on a timer, turn my lights off, and just leave them. And the next day, like I come in, plug back on my lights, like let it exhaust out, and my plants just are so happy.
yeah. I mean, I have a book on like sulfur, or maybe I gave that to you. I'm
You
not
did
sure.
it. It's my favorite book
Oh, yeah.
ever. I'm so glad that you just brought that up.
Yeah, and my advisor at CSU gave it to me, and
It's
like,
phenomenal.
yeah, and
I'll-
just like talks about like the whole thing is about sulfur and plant biology and how it's like kind of overlooked a lot of the times.
I just love. Okay, so I don't want to talk about this because you're gonna be so much more graceful, and people want to hear your sweet baby angel voice. Okay, do you recommend burning it at any like, or do you? Okay, is there specific benefits that you've seen? Like, let's just say PM. Do you think that it could be preventative for spores in your grow, or if you're combating PM for like long term? Like say somebody keeps having it pop up, flare after flare and flower or something. Do you think that they could burn sulfur in that room even without the plants potentially after they harvest a space?
Well, so I've never really burned sulfur. You know, the times I've
love
used it, it's been micronized
Wow.
sulfur, like just elemental sulfur, and not being burnt. Because I've mostly used it for like killing mites, because it kills mites pretty well. Like
Spider mites.
yeah, well, a lot of
was gonna
mites,
ask.
a lot of
Okay.
different mites, but russet mites especially. Like
Really knocks them out.
whereas burning sulfur doesn't kill them. So like I just haven't gone there really.
No, Andrew, this is so important because russets are a serious problem. And they're like, I see them in everybody's weed and everybody's garden. But do you think that there's a tip that you could give anybody with like that specifically, or what it could be?
Yeah, know your enemy, right?
Okay.
Integrated pest management, really, a lot of it relies on knowing the specific life cycle, how the plants feed, or how the insects feed, the pests feed on the plants, like, really understanding, like, when do they lay eggs, what's, the amount of time it takes them to do that at different temperatures, and then you can really predict when they're at their weakest. And so people are going to think I'm crazy. Well, if they've seen me on the show before, they'll know that already. But I kept russet mites, like a population of russet mites in my garage for
Oh my
like
God.
9 months just to study them. Like, because I wanted to know, I'm curious about
How
a
did
lot
you
of
keep
different
them?
things.
Was it on a plant?
On plants, yeah.
Love
I just like kept growing the plants and like cutting them, like cutting clones and just
It's the best
kept
way
doing
to
it.
do it.
And what I was really looking at was, like genetic barriers, not necessarily like, immunity, but like just, breeding for non-secretory trichomes, for example, just the hair-like projections that you find. I found that certain strains had less damage from russets, and you can kind of tell because you look at population density, like once they
Yes.
get kind of overpopulated, like you still got them in kind of units of area a lot of the time. And where we saw like the lowest rates of success, it was me. Anyway,
I love that.
was on plants that had a lot of additional non-secretory trichomes. And so, a lot of just regular old trichomes, and it just inhibited the way that they were able to walk through because they're so small, right? And so, I mean, that's something you can breed for. And so,
love that
I
you
was just fucking with russet mites for like 9 months, like trying to kill them in different ways. Sulfur is really the only thing that you can use. And, the ability to clean out your grow, to not have because they can only live for like 3 or 4 weeks without like eating something, right?
It's pretty good.
And
They're
so
short.
if you have a perpetual harvest cycle, like it's gonna be difficult because you can't empty the room and really do what you need to do. I mean, you don't want to spray sulfur, like micronized sulfur, on weed plants that are anywhere near flowering, right?
Right.
Because it stays on the plant until until somebody smokes it. You know what I mean?
I love though that you bring that up because I think week one is I do it. It's like if I'm in that situation where I do have russets and I am running a perpetual space, I'll be honest. I do it.
Yeah.
So on week one,
But it's small, right?
yeah, and you're mixing it at a very low rate. And like honestly, this is weird, but I think that as a rule of thumb, period, is like you don't want to spray anything or treat anything once the pistils of the plant or the plant really starts developing, like that photo period really starts coming out, right? Like the plant is fully transitioned. She starts having bud sites, like there's hairs.
Yeah.
As a general rule, nobody wants to treat past that point. Like
hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that if you like cinnamon and some of these other approaches, like if you're really in a tight spot, is like I think you can take so many other routes now that are accessible and out there on the internet, especially it seems like. I don't know that you don't have to use a pesticide or a treatment. Period.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got, like I've said this before, but like the best insurance against pest and disease is like having very fast growing, vigorous plants.
Andrew, I just love that you say this. So nematodes is like the best way to beat nematodes. Like I'm saying, like dudding from nematodes in a plant is lighting most times and like shifting them to rock wool, and it's really to just get them to grow as fast as possible.
Are you talking about like root knot
Yeah.
nematodes?
Sorry. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody out there, if you got a microscope, there's like 5 different heads on nematodes, right? And like the only ones you have to worry about, because nematodes, like I heard somebody say that like if you were to remove every natural thing on the planet, there would still be an outline of like nematodes on it, right? Because nematodes are very successful as organisms. But if you're like messing around with a microscope and you see nematodes, it's not necessarily a problem. The thing to look for is a stylet. It's a thing like almost like a sewing machine. It's got this little tip that will stick holes in cells, like plant cells. And so you can tell
It's like a little needle.
Yeah, exactly. And so like you can tell, the kinds that are not bad from the one, sort of big problematic ones, like lifestyle, that is, like, because the other ones can't put a hole in a cell to feed, right? They have to have that stylet. And so ones that can harm plants are always going to have a stylet. And so if you're looking at them under a microscope, if they don't have a stylet, it's not really a problem.
Andrew, I'm so grateful for you explaining this and really just like making that distinguished, just like, okay. Just
Did
never
you hear that? I'm distinguished.
just never mind.
I've distinguished myself by like making an ass of myself.
I'm just like gonna give up on talking. I'll see you 1 week with skipping the show, and I already can't talk. It's like,
and I'm a hard person to have as a guest because like I talk a lot of shit, right?
That is not true.
I make a lot of jokes.
The best guest is I feel so no. It's like so many people have asked me, and I never like. So many people have asked me when you talk about beneficial nematodes, it's like a lot of people love using them when they're combating aphids late into a flowering room, and they're very successful with it. It is a great approach for certain times. And anyways, but as far as this knotting, so whenever I do these treatments, right, is you're hoping for this new growth. Is like ultimately whenever you're trying to combat anything, like any pest and disease issue, and like you said, the faster you can get the growth, and the faster I can take a clone of that new growth and get it in a quarantined area and like keep them separate and sterilize my space, is like that's really the most successful I've ever been with combating anything. But I see where these nematodes are really a problem. Okay, I say this because I see a lot of people that would have growth in their garden, say like more HLVD, stunting and like branching out and like this weird lateral growth.
Yeah.
But you can see those little notches where you'll get these nematodes. And when you're combating already these diseases, I think that that's that entry point is
Totally. So
okay.
like pests a lot of the time either vector diseases or they put a wound in the surface of the plant that things can get in. Then if you got something like HLVD that weakens the plant, that's when you
Already.
start having, disease problems, secondary disease problems, right? And like having problems with mites and all that shit because the plant isn't like growing fast enough or like healthy enough to just use its kind of natural defenses.
Yes. And I think rock wool, like for people that would never be open to rock wool though, is if you use rock wool when you're combating some of these things, even for a temporary period, is like if you can get it from a clone into like a 4-inch block, I've found, and not have aphids and not have russets,
Yeah.
is like if you can, or fungus gnats, thrips, like you really got to
Yeah.
have nothing moving going on. Is like I think you can really clone out of some of these things and like get the growth fast enough, but you got to stay on top of it. Is it's weird, you'll start seeing this beautiful growth and you'll think you're free and clear. I see people make this mistake all the time. It'll happen for like all these people will be like green cleaner fixes everything. I fucking hate green cleaner. Just I'm sorry. And maybe I should talk to them and maybe they should come on the show and maybe I should apologize for this. But I have just had every grow that I have ever tried to help with anything. Their staff comes to me and it's always that they're like, "Have you ever tried green cleaner?" And I'm just like, "Dude, your boss called me. Okay?" Like green cleaner is not working for everything that
Yeah.
you think it's working for. I'm not saying it's a bad company. I'm not saying it doesn't combat some of these things, but it's really a lot of essential oils, right? And those are really good for preventative things and like organically, like outside spaces, like great products. But when you're really combating shit, when you've really got war going on in your grow rooms, you got russets, say, with aphids and HLVD and fusarium and botrytis. Like people don't even realize this is happening.
Well, the best thing to treat all of those things is gasoline in a match, right? Like, if you got all of those, I mean, really, I mean, you want to start kind of fresh. And like, unfortunately, with HLVD, it's like, you have to do like meristem culture to get rid of it.
To really,
It's seed borne. It's a motherfucker. Like, it's really hard to come back from because, you get crop loss. It's hard to tell you have it for
yeah.
quite a while. And then,
How do you think they start telling?
so just general loss of vigor is like one of the first things that you see. And then you'll see like chlorosis, like yellowing. Sometimes you'll see patterns and shit.
Not good patterns. Like
No.
people, I think, get these confused though. They'll be like, "Oh, this is nitrogen deficient," or "Oh, this plant is flushing."
Yeah, and like when I got into the industry in like 2016, it was like the best thing that I could find was a poster of like hand drawn. You've probably all seen this, like the hand drawn things that like show the different nitrogen deficiencies. It's not like actually, pictures of them. So like one of the things I did at Native was like to induce fucking, because we made our own nutrients, and so we would leave each element out.
Wow.
Right? Like, and
Yeah.
then induce symptoms, like, so that then we could take high res photos and like actually know what it looks like. Because when you got a bunch of people arguing over what it looks like, for one thing, it's not a productive use of time. For another, it's better, like I've said before, to back off a little bit on newts when you see it, right? Rather than trying to guess what it's deficient in and then throwing shit at it, right?
Yes.
Because you can, the plants, like, they know what they're doing, like, better than we do. And so,
Definitely.
just having low levels of fertilizer for a second while you figure it out, lower levels, is often like what you need to figure it out, right? Like, is it a disease or is it a nutrient deficiency? Is it a nutrient excess? Because there's a lot of things that having too hot, a feed can do. If your pH isn't right, like, it'll skew toward, different things are more soluble at different pHs. And so, like, if something's off, then you can end up with toxicities, right?
Yeah.
Like, and then if somebody's like, oh, it's deficient, then you throw a bunch more shit into the mix, right?
pH alone, Andrew, is like, I feel like we all have like sloppy moments at some point of growing where we're like, I'm just gonna fill the bin and I'm just gonna put it on my plants. So for instance, like wintertime or whatever right now is like our water is coming out already pretty high. It's like at like 7.4 or something like that coming out of the Denver city tap, you know? And
Plus the lead.
yeah, exactly. Like overload, man. Like it's so funny to me that we get tested. Sorry, real quick insert because that is so yes. Is we get tested at parts per billion, and then we'll go through and like test all the equipment in the grow, test everything, make sure everything's clean, sterile. Like be bitching at all these companies for everything. And then you'll find out that, yeah, the lead is just like pouring through the pipes. It's just like,
Yeah.
give them more.
I mean, that's like if you're looking at, you've got a problem with disease, you got a problem with heavy metals. First thing you do is look at your water, because like often the water has low levels of plant pathogenic stuff in it, right? And that's not a huge priority for human health because plant pathogens typically don't infect humans unless they're like, severely immunocompromised. And then, things like Fusarium, Aspergillus, those can actually kill people, right? And, if you get invasive fusariosis, for example, like you're just like, you want to smoke some weed because you want to eat after fucking chemo or something, right? And then you're inhaling these spores, and typically fungi don't like us. We're just inhospitable hosts, right? Like if fungi were better at causing human disease, we would all be fucked because they're so close to us. They're so much closer to us than bacteria are, just evolutionarily, because they're eukaryotes and, bacteria are prokaryotes. And so like the things you can use to kill bacteria often aren't toxic to us, but the things you use to kill fungi are often more toxic, and so you run the risk of killing the host before you can kill the fungi, right? And so with I started talking about invasive fusariosis. So the prognosis for that, you get 50%, right? Like kills half the people that get it. Also mucormycosis, like fungi from the mucorales.
50%.
Yeah, that's also 50%. Aspergillosis, averages out of all the different types at around 50%. And so you're, half and half going to die from it, right?
So this is why I'm an advocate for testing, period. But this is weird. Is working on our sides of the field, period. Is like you're seeing these changes in compliance over the years. And this is strange, but I don't know. It's like you're not testing for what people think that they're testing for. Is a term like testing for pesticides, right? At even parts per billion. Is they're only testing for these 13 pesticides.
Yeah.
And so if there's hundreds of pesticides, right? We go to Home Depot, we see a huge selection. You go to the grocery store, you see a huge selection. So it's not saying that this company never sprayed pesticides. It's saying they never used these 13 pesticides. And so it's like high five. So to me, I feel like it's not really what people think it is.
Yeah.
Is like, and then when it's a business to me within itself. It's like, sure. Like, and now I see the more rigorous they get with testing, right? The more people have to alter their testing samples.
Yeah.
And it's causing this weird thing where the state is seeing so much of that, where they now you can get a misdemeanor offense if you alter your test samples.
No shit. Yeah, I hadn't heard of this.
Yeah, they just 2 years ago.
I had friends that worked in labs, and they're like, yeah, oh God, we see like shit that's been microwaved.
That's exactly. That's exactly.
Just all sorts of shit.
Sprayed with shit, like dipped with shit.
And like I've seen a lot of growers like really resist the additional testing because for one, it's expensive as fuck.
So expensive,
right?
$400 a batch.
When it comes to testing for fungi, like they used to just do total yeast and mold, right?
Yeah.
And now they've got very specific things, like the four, biggest offenders as far as producing human illness in the aspergillosis.
Which
category.
made everybody fail. Aspergillosis made everybody struggle.
I mean the spores, they're called something else, but like the spore is just a catch-all term, right? But the spores are only like a little over 1 millimeter typically, or sorry, micron.
Wow.
right? And
So
so
small.
a little over, 1 millionth of a meter, right? And so um, that's really hard to have even like, your HVAC
Mm.
system. Like, because if your HVAC wasn't designed to have like enough of a pressure drop to accommodate those higher level filters, then you're just kind of screwed. Like, and you
Because
have
it's
to
going to
rely on
always.
sprays, right? You have to spray a lot, which requires a spray team. And then you've got to worry about like, do they know how long these sprays stay active once you mix them?
Yeah.
Are they cutting corners? Like, it's those multiple points of failure thing we were talking about. And also, sprays are expensive, right?
So expensive.
And employing people that actually know what they're doing and aren't going to spray themselves in the face or something.
I think that that's the thing is I've always had to do all of these applications at the facilities because like I won't put somebody else in that position honestly is like for lots of reasons but like you want to most importantly is I'm like you're not gonna do it right is there's a, there's a right way to do this to keep yourself safe
Yeah.
and keep your plants healthy but like I don't know it's I don't know it seems to be hard but I think that when you look at testing at parts per million though is back in the day that to me was keeping people safe like but it was keeping businesses in business, right? Like, like it kept product rolling, and I hate to put it like that, but the more rigorous the testing has got, that's what tanked the industry in Colorado. Is you couldn't sell your crops, you had to throw it away,
Yeah.
and that's a huge expense. Like these facilities
Totally.
are huge, and when you're testing something at parts per billion, you're going to come up for it. Like if you have a staff member mishandle something at any part of that process
Yeah.
of getting packaged or sent off to the lab, and then if you look at a grow room, like you said, your HVAC, most of these facilities are all sharing all this shit. Is like as a standard build, it's pulling from the same place, exhausting from usually a similar space or from a hallway or
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I mean, like, fungi are great at just eating lots of different organic shit, right? And so you can get them in your media, right? And they're just putting off spores the whole time, right?
Constant.
And, it's just really hard to keep them clean unless you start from a biosecurity standpoint, right? Like from the beginning, when
Yeah.
you're designing your grows, you've got positive pressure and where it's supposed to be, and negative pressure and where it's supposed to be, right? Like, and
Ooh.
like you've got the proper like air filtration, the right amount of cycles per fucking hour. Like you have to make sure that these microbes can pump out a lot of fucking spores relatively fast, and they just blow in if you don't have enough positive pressure, like for example in your entrances, right?
Yes.
I've seen a lot of companies buy air showers, right? Because like there's all these ancillary
Oh.
companies that came in, right? And they're like, "Ooh, buy this," right? And a lot of people are like, "Okay, I just got funded. I'm gonna get that, and that." But
Yeah.
then you find out like the filters haven't been changed on the air shower in like five, so they're just redistributing. At that point, microbes like that came off the
Everywhere.
last person, like
Everywhere.
And another thing, like Sanidate mats, they're
Yeah.
great if you
Love 'em.
refresh them,
You have to do it
right?
every 2-3 days, I feel like. What do you think?
Less.
Less?
Yeah,
Dang.
significantly less, like daily, because
Oh,
they
that's
lose.
probably
Yeah, because I mean they're unstable molecules,
hydrogen.
right? And so I love Sanidate. I mean it's a great product. It's somewhat corrosive, so I like to use it in specific things and then use other things for to take care of some other stuff without being too specific. I don't want to piss anybody off because I like those guys.
Biosafe is awesome.
Yeah, for sure. And so like the Sanidate mats are great if you replenish it like as often as you're supposed to.
Yeah.
If not, I started calling them inoculation mats because I was culturing shit
Oh,
just
shit.
out of them to find out. And then you're walking through your grow and you're just redistributing all these fucking things throughout it because like microbes love wet environments to reproduce. And with
Moist.
relatively short-lived molecules like hydrogen peroxide, for example, like it's unstable just by its nature, and so that's why it helps to kill shit, right? Like, and
Comes in
so
hot.
Yeah, but it's gone within a very short amount of time. And then you've got this mat that's like wet and it's like an ideal place for microbes to just grow, you know?
I love that you bring that up, period, because I think everybody should have a mat like this. They're difficult because they're expensive. For the real one,
Yeah.
it's like 220, I think, on like uline.com. You can find those sexy mats to sterilize your feet. But Sanidate, we used to use at Rare Dankness, is they like so when it was such a small team. It was like Scott, Rugburn, and me. And there was one guy that came on later. But I feel like so everybody was really particular at that time.
Hmm.
And that we would fill 5-gallon buckets every morning. And this is a pretty large warehouse. And so we would spread out the 5-gallon buckets, right? Like on probably 2 mats. And I don't know.
Yeah.
We had to change them out every day, but we had a washout space. We had a really ideal situation. I'm not gonna lie. It was like it was working. It was a workable space. I found that with BioSafe products, it is really hard for some grows to use because of the chemical burn.
Hmm.
It's not so gnarly, but you should wear your PPE.
Certainly. When it says causes like what is it? Like irreversible eye damage, right? Like, you know,
Everything.
pay attention to that shit, right?
Wear your safety goggles.
Like I remember when I told my advisor, he's like, "How did it go today out in the field?" Right? Like, because I was working on wheat and on the wheat genetics team at CSU.
That's
In
so
a
cool.
very low capacity, though. I mean, those guys are super smart that were making the calls. But anyway, I was like, well, I found out what substantial but temporary eye damage means. You know, like because DEET, for example, you know, we had to use a lot of that to
Yeah.
not get bitten by the clouds of mosquitoes that are going to be in a wheat field, right? Or an irrigated wheat field at least. And so,
worst.
like if you spray it, it says right on the label, like causes substantial but temporary eye damage, right?
Oh my gosh.
So he's like, "Oh God, do I have to fill out a form?" I was like, "Dude, I'm just joking." Like, I might have like brought up it was really hard to make this guy laugh, right? Like, he's like, "Do you know what a precursor is?" I'm like, "A little kid that says dang a lot," you know, like I don't fucking know. But you know, he knew that I had taken like 4 semesters of chemistry already, so of course I know what a precursor is, right? But I couldn't make this dude laugh, so I just like almost tried to make it a sport. You know what I mean? Like, I did get him, a couple times. He was like, "You've done a lot of different things. You know, what haven't you been?" I was like, "Successful." That got a laugh.
That's what I'm talking about. That's such a good. I love it. I think. Well, Andrew, that's just a 10-pointer. I think that I don't know. What do you want to touch on? What do you want to touch on? No.
Not to put me on the spot or anything, Jay, but
I was just so excited you brought up the HVAC thing.
yeah, like so HVAC is really important. Like actually understanding the MERV rating system and like like what do the different filters do? Because it doesn't matter if you got like a MERV 8 filter. Like if it's you have to know which microbes and what their spore size is. Like what are you trying to exclude from your grow, right? And then you can choose the appropriate MERV rating, and then hopefully. This is part of the design process, right? So you're not having to go back and see like, oh shit, we can't actually put a MERV, 11 or 13 or whatever you need
Yeah.
on the system because the pressure drop, like it won't handle it. Like, it's built flawed from the beginning because of a kind of lack of baseline understanding of what you're trying to exclude and like what are the goals in HVAC, right?
I feel like HVAC gets forgotten all the time, or it gets overdone. Is like there's no in between.
They're
I
like,
feel
this one has a space laser inside of it that actually, vaporizes microbes. You know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
some have UV. Like,
What do you think about that?
Well, so UV requires like a certain amount of time a lot of the time, or it has to be extremely strong, right? And if you got HVAC system, that air is moving pretty fast. So you actually have to have, sometimes UV is just kind of an add-on by the company. It's like, we'll do that. It's just, I've run into this with laminar flow hoods, for example. The UV it's nice, but it's like a lot of the time it has dangers associated with it, and like it has to be a specific amount of time that the microbes are exposed to it, because it works by breaking down like genes, essentially, like DNA, right? And so yeah, like any kind of ionizing radiation like just creates breaks, right, in the
Chain of.
yeah, in the chromosome, right? Like in the genes. And God damn it, I have a degree in
Don't.
genetics.
Yo, you're
So
crushing. Just
no, so basically, like you've got in eukaryotes, you've got like linear DNA, right?
Wow.
Like chromosomes, right? Everybody's probably seen pictures of the chromosomes, right? They start at one end and they end at another, and so ionizing radiation will actually put breaks in that, right? Which is why, like, sometimes if you're trying to use one of those like X-ray machines or whatever the hell it is
Yeah.
to sterilize your crop, because you need to pass tests essentially at the end of the day, they use qPCR, like quantitative polymerase chain reaction. So like that detects very fragments, right? And so if you're just putting breaks in it, right, like chances are you're still going to have some of these fragments like able to be amplified by qPCR. And so like it's not necessarily going, it might kill living things on the crop, which is fucking great
Yeah.
for the reasons we talked about with invasive fungal illness. But it's not necessarily going to protect you from the testing, right?
Yeah, because you can't change old growth. Is to some degree. Well, no, to all degrees. Is I feel sorry. Is I think that people don't realize that when a plant gets sick at any point in time, like, or something is displaced, is that 24 hours to 48 hours of its true reaction time, and like when it will really start to show symptoms. And like even pesticides is like, or treatments as a whole, is like, people think that obviously you can get a reaction really quickly if you like fry the shit out of something. Like you'll see something in 24.
Not to say that either one of us have ever done that multiple times.
Never.
Just theoretically.
Exactly. And so I think that, but it's like by day 6 or 7, it's technically the time that you should really see the full reaction of a plant. Is if you kill them before that, it is too much.
It's a large oversight, right? It's a large problem, and it should be fairly obvious,
Yeah.
I've definitely done that before. But it's not necessarily, now that I'm saying it should be fairly obvious. I've got the benefit of hindsight, right?
Yeah.
But at the front end, it's not, like you might be making a decision. You're like, oh, this sounds like it works, right? And then you try it, and hopefully you don't try it at scale,
Yeah.
right? Because if you
Don't
do,
wanna try.
yeah, you don't want to do that. You want to have a small group of plants that it's like when they, you have like a cleaner or whatever, and it says test on a small spot in an inconspicuous place before you try it on different materials, right?
Yes.
That's what you should do with the grow. Like you don't want to like change anything drastically without testing it, because every grow is different. Every grow has different fluctuations in their environmental, shits, which is a technical term. I patented it. And so, actually, I don't think you can patent a term. You can trademark things, but
Same with measurements.
I don't really know patent law, so I'm not even going to start. But but yeah, like understanding the difference between theory and practice, like that's super important. And
Very
hopefully
important.
you test things out on a small scale before you just chuck them into the large scale.
It's weird because I think that the home growers that like listen to the show, honestly, is I feel like they're really talented growers, and it's funny. It's not funny. It's crazy to me because I think if they were given the opportunity to work in these places and spaces, they would like definitely crush. But because of where they're located, or I don't know, even in different places of the world right now, it's like, or limitations as far as if you're not pursuing this as a career, you'll never get to work with like a commercial indoor count like that. Like,
Totally. And one thing I found in some grows is that like upper management is like not necessarily they needed warm bodies when it was super fucking lucrative, right? And then there are these
Yeah.
people that are like, You know what I mean? And then you try to like come in there as a skilled individual, and they're like, they see it as a threat immediately.
Big time. That's been my honestly biggest obstacle of my career ever. Is like, and it's not even in the way it sounds, but it's like when you come in and you like say like the team has been the same team for a long time. Like to their credit, it's like they've gone through a lot of shit for a long time, and they've been like used and abused in every way, shape, and form.
Yes,
And
I've
you,
seen this too.
yeah, and you'll come in and like you'll fix things that like they weren't able to like identify. That's usually what it is. It's like there's always a solution, but it's like they've tried everything under the sun. They'll make sure you know. And you know that though. You already know that they care about this place and
Yeah.
space. You already know they love their plants. Like you're like, dude, I know this. But it's like it's funny to me because people have like tried sabotaging me in every way, shape, and form. I feel like with crops, like specifically, and like because they don't want to see you come in and crush. Like they want to see their company do good, but they're like, this bitch.
You
like,
can't teach anybody anything that already knows everything.
Yeah, and then you're kind of like exactly that energy too. You got to be fragile with plants. It sounds weird, but it's like, and as a
You have to be connected. You have to understand like what the plant does and why, right? Like to be able to actually know what you're doing. It's not like, you know, fucking producing air filters, right? In
Yeah.
an assembly line, or like, you know, it's not that kind of thing. You have to actually know. And so growers like have to be kind of generalists, and like so it's hard, especially when you're getting paid shit, right? Like,
Yeah.
you have to be like you know, to some degree a microbiologist and a fucking, you know know about IPM and like all
the
these other things.
electrician, the plumber.
Yeah, hopefully not, but yeah, often, right?
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
Um,
It's a strange thing.
and so then you've got somebody that's skilled coming in, and people can see it as a threat. And also, nobody likes to be told their baby is ugly. You know what I'm saying?
It's the
like,
perfect way to put it.
and like, you know, I'm sensitive to that, and I understand people put a lot of work, and there are a huge amount of skilled people in the industry, right?
Yeah.
And some people just crush, like they do it really well. But sometimes there are things that are, you know, outside of the scope of being a generalist, like that actually require some study to like figure out. And then if you're trying to sell services, people are like, well, that's never been a problem before, but that's like a fallacy of logic. You know what I mean? It's like, I know this
Yeah.
one dude that has done that a bunch of times, and like it never killed them. You know what I mean? But that's a sample size of one, right? Like
It's true.
You know, that tells you
There's a lot of other factors that could go into that.
right? Like, so you need, you know, hundreds, if not thousands,
Mm-hmm.
you know, of those people that have done that and not died, right? Like, to be able to have any statistical correlation, right? And so, like, a common fallacy of logic is just, you know, like, we've never seen it before.
Yeah.
You know, we never had this problem, so we're not going to have one.
I love that you bring up the things that you touch on every time. I enjoy it. It's like, I don't know. I think that it's like a strange. No, thank you. I think it's a strange thing that like the water. I'm so convinced of this. Like honestly, is when I first started growing weed. Period. Is like everybody used a hydro filter like system of something.
Yeah, like RO.
Exactly. RO. Sorry, I have weed in my mouth. Excuse me.
You should have used one of those pasta noodles.
Yeah, I should have. Thank you. It was the last one had it, and now I wasn't like chewing on it. So excuse me. So RO, everybody started running with like everybody back in the day, and everybody's weed was better, right? Like this is the truth across the board. And there, you didn't see things like fusarium. You didn't see things like botrytis and pythium, and some of these other diseases. Like people are talking about HLVD so much, but like when I look at these other things, like people have been combating for years, way before HLVD was even discussed, is like the fusarium. Honestly, it's just so detrimental. It's so sad, and I don't know, when you see all of these different things take over a space, I'm really convinced that the water has a huge factor in the last 5 years of cultivation that I've seen. Everybody stopped replacing their filters, or stopped using RO, or stopped maintaining their machines, or you know what
Yeah, I've definitely seen, you know, like RO water that is very resistant to pH change when you dump shit in it, right? And
Yes.
it's like, why does it have a pH of 8.5 coming out of it? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't work unless you replace the filters. The filters are expensive,
They are.
right?
Sucks.
And so, like, you can actually, pretty much every county has a water quality report that they issue periodically, and you can check that. And it's like important to know what you're dealing with, and then you can choose the appropriate level of filtration, right?
I think we should bring that on the show sometime. Water around us.
Yeah, like a RO filter, we could.
Well, oh yeah, the RO filter,
No,
and
I'm
I
just
think
kidding.
we should put our little water report.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's great. Like Denver has a water report. I don't know if it's a good one, but
They're in trouble right
yeah,
now.
the report card. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of
And
red,
everybody's like,
red
drink
pen.
the tap water. Dude,
Yeah.
don't brush your teeth.
Yeah, well, you get minerals, just not the right ones.
I don't see. That's the thing is, if you're not gonna run RO, a lot of people are convinced that it's too wasteful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you think about that, Andrew?
I also think that. However,
yeah,
right, like in some situations when you got certain water quality issues, that makes the most sense, right?
I love this cost analysis and like P analysis.
Yeah, and so you got to figure out, like, first you look at the water reports, then hopefully you test some samples, figure out, does it actually, does it differ?
working?
Because yeah, like the chemistry of water changes with the seasons, right?
Dramatically.
Yeah, totally. And so you kind of have to know what you're working with at each point in time. But you don't have to like test all the time, but it's very useful to test at the front end and also look at what the water report says, because it's a generalization for an entire area, right? And different local places within that area might have different values.
Do you think you have factors like leaching and pipes like corroding and stuff like that to like come into play even on the water reports? Like,
Yeah, I mean, if it's old stuff, like,
Yeah.
a lot of the time it'll have metals in it that are like not up to code these days. You
So
know?
this is the correlation that I'm seeing, overlooking, like I said, the last 5 to 7 years, if I'm being honest, is like there's been a rapid decline in these really talented growers and breeders and people that I know what they're doing and do a beautiful job. Is like their crops have hit some obstacles, like this stuff. Is I think that's where the water and like soil mediums, all these other things come into play. But the water I see is this pattern. And I think that, damn it, this is why I wish I didn't smoke so much. Just hold on, I'll remember. Nope.
I just always tell people I've been hitting the head a lot,
Thanks, Andrew.
I
I just feel like if we just all went back to filtering our water, I think that you would see these things decline and like the quality increase massively.
Yeah, and really it just depends on like the necessity, because like you always have to balance cost, right? And like the water
Yeah.
wastage, I mean, best I've seen is 1 gallon waste for every gallon of RO.
Yep.
But like worse is like 3 gallons for 1 gallon of RO. And you've got to balance that cost. And hopefully you're thinking about whether or not you live in a desert, because I mean that's not like a great use of water.
Yeah, like if you're really in Arizona or in these different places that you're paying premium, California, like all those places. But the thing is I would, like you said, cost wise, if I was actually running a crop at a home grow, I definitely do it though. Is like if you have these like small setups or even like honestly drip irrigation. This is when this really comes into play to me. Is if you run it right and you put your plants on drip, you will save so much in water.
Totally. And you don't have to rely on each employee to know exactly when to water, right? Because
Yeah.
hand watering, man, like not every plant drinks at the same rate, right? And when you've got a steady drip, like at certain times of the day, the plant will kind of adjust to that, right? And it'll fucking get what it needs without getting waterlogged,
That's where I think people mess up, is where they hate irrigation or they're not open to it. Is I think that people don't realize that you have to train a plant to drink that way. It's like, it's not saying that they don't like it. It's not saying that they love it to me, but you still have to go with her. And like, you can't just like flood a plant and be like, okay, I'm done. I'm doing drip irrigation. And I feel like a lot of people either oversaturate their plants their first time with running drip, or they under
Yeah.
like water them and then they start waterlogging or all
Yeah,
different.
like
Yeah.
so roots have to breathe, right? Like roots, they have to be able to breathe. So you have to have a like wet to dry cycle. You know what I mean? And the more wet to dry cycles you can get, the faster, right? Like you can grow your plants. You have biomass accumulate faster. The more of those you can get in because, water doesn't hold a lot of dissolved oxygen. It's not very many parts per million of dissolved oxygen just by its nature, right? Like it's
Pretty dense.
yeah, it just doesn't hold a lot of it, right? And so plant roots like cells need to be able to make sugar, and they do that with respiration. And so like basically that requires oxygen. You know what I mean? And so like the
really
plant needs
great.
to drink, but it also needs to dry out like to have these other processes happen. And so like I mean not even taking into account if you have saturated soil all the time, you're spitting out aspergillus into the air, you're doing all sorts of other shit, providing a breeding ground for microbes. But like one of the main problems is if you kill the root hairs, that's where most of the water uptake happens for the plant. So if you dry them out too much, then they lose their root hairs, and then you've got like 90% less water uptake in the plant, and it's hard to bounce back from that.
How do you bounce back from that, Andrew? For the people that when we're like, oop, we should have watered her yesterday.
Yeah, it takes time, right? Like plants keep their own kind of counsel. They do what they're going to do and what they're programmed to do. I mean, we don't have any part in the programming process. I mean, that's millions of years of evolution, and so sometimes you just got to wait for the plant to grow new root hairs or new roots, and that can be a bitch if you're in commercial production, right? And so
4, 5, 6 days.
yeah.
Sometimes longer.
Yeah, like it takes a while. And, the reason for root hairs is that they just increase the surface area of the root, right?
Wow.
And so that's like more capacity for absorption.
I think that people don't realize that a lot of the roots that you see in easy cloners or even with cloning period, but like on the stalk, on the very top, they almost look like pimples or something or warts. I think people don't realize that they're actually roots, that if you put them in a humid enough environment, like they will start shooting off and they
Totally. Yeah, like plants have just like humans have stem cells, right? Like they don't have a predetermined fate as far as what tissue they can grow into. So they can grow into lung tissue, or they can grow into fucking, whatever else. I study plants. I don't fucking know about like humans that much, but people have told me this anyway. But like, yeah. See, now I did it, and I haven't even smoked weed in a couple months. Yeah, what the hell were we just talking about? Oh yeah, we were talking about adventitious outgrowth like points, right? Like so you've got these places that can grow roots or shoots depending on what the needs of the plant are. And so there's a lot of different places along, like usually the nodes are the best place to do it. However, the plant has a certain amount of the tissue inside of the like the actual stem that has some plasticity, and so it can actually start to grow, roots out of the stem. I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, they only grow out of a node." You know what I mean? But like essentially,
That's actually really cool.
yeah, like basically the plants make a bunch of undifferentiated growth, like cells. Basically, an undifferentiated cell is like one that doesn't have a predetermined like fate necessarily, and they can turn into other things when the need arises.
Almost like if it's in an ideal climate, then it's going to prosper or get really vigorous. Or what do you think, Andrew? Like depending on the path that it could take.
Like as far as rooting?
Yeah.
Well, rooting, I mean, it depends. It really depends on the plant. Like, not.
That's a good point.
I mean, outside of cannabis, like some plants just don't like to grow roots outside of, in certain parts of their anatomy, right? And luckily, cannabis is fairly, like it's pretty tolerant. It's a pretty tolerant plant, right?
Like, I will live.
I've abused the shit out of it just to see what it would do, right? Like from hollering at it, feeding it root beer and Skittles and shit. I mean, not really, but like it's a plant that will withstand a fair amount of abuse, right? And
Definitely.
so,
Gosh.
if you're only seeing like rooting at the nodes, then maybe you should look at how you're taking the clones, what part of the plant you're taking the clones from, and what you're using to induce roots, right? I know a guy that had great success just using aloe vera gel, right? The kind you can buy at the store, like that people sometimes will drink. Not the pre-made drinks, but like the, just the pure juice, right? And it has a lot of rooting hormones in it. And so, you have to look at, with IBA, for example, like IBA isn't used directly by the plant. I mean, it is, but it's not what causes rooting, right? Like it turns into IAA, which is indole. I'm not even going to try it.
Indole acid.
And so
yep.
it's converted into something, right? And also like the length of time of exposure and like how is it getting pushed off the plant as you like stick it in there? How long are you letting it sit on there? What's the concentration of IBA to begin with? Because there's like IBA salts, for example, like you can get a 20%. Yeah, exactly. But you have to add something to those to make them stick for a while to be effective, right? Because the plant's got tissues around the stem that like take time to penetrate, and then there's like a gradient as far as like how much gets to it by a certain time. Also, IBA, if you come too hot with it, like it can inhibit rooting, and so you have to actually kind of know like what you're doing. And if the plant isn't rooting well, you need to look at your process.
Ooh.
Unless it's just a shitty clone. I see a lot of people breeding plants just for the top parts, like, you know what I mean, and like the finished flower.
Oh.
But like you have to breed for like vigorous plants, 'cause nobody wants to fucking deal with a plant that's like not going to produce and is kind of finicky.
That's why white truffle and white runs. Okay, I'm just saying. These are the most like vigorous plants that I've seen recently. Like Oreos is another one. It's really popular. But they really just take off. The thing is like from clones through a lot of shit, they're really resilient strains. Like, and they just produce good tasting weed. Like, I think it doesn't stand out to me. I'll be honest, as far as like weed, like back in the day, like being so distinguished, like to like some type of category. I feel like skunks were skunks, diesels were diesels.
Like I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and like I remember reading High Times like as a teenager, and if I'm being real, a little before.
Wow.
And like we didn't have a lot of fucking information, right? It was all kind of tribal knowledge. It was before the internet, right? And so like you couldn't really, you had to know somebody that knew, or you had to look it up.
That knew somebody
in an actual book, right? Like
that's crazy.
Yeah, it was a wild time, and it led to a lot of people being like, "Gather round, I'll tell you the real story," and having no idea what the fuck they were talking about. Because it's hard to fact check anything if you got to fucking go to the library. You know what I'm saying? Like on the spot.
I feel like relationships were healthier back then.
Yeah.
Now everybody's like fucking snapping and Googling and recording.
Yeah, if I can't have like the answer within 30 seconds, I don't want it,
Yeah.
But
I don't even care.
I think also a lot of people need just to understand how to search, right? Like how to get valid information. Because the .com, that stands for commercial, right? So every .com is trying to sell something, as whether it's, they have ad revenue that's coming off, from ads on it. They're always selling something because it's a commercial site. .orgs is only for nonprofits, right? And so that's a little bit better than .com's information because they're not trying to sell you something necessarily, but nonprofits also have to be a business, like to stay alive to some degree, depending on which one it is. And so the next level is like .edu, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
and so that's like typically, colleges, right, that are publishing things. And so .edu is like education, I guess. And so that's like where you get more reliable information than the other two ways.
That is incredible knowledge that you shared.
And you can sort on
You
Google.
can actually sort.
Oh yeah, if you do site colon .edu, it'll only return results that are .edu. You can do that with any type of, any dot whatever, right? Like, so you can, site colon .gov, and it'll search only for results. You just put that into your search at the end, right?
Oh,
And
dang,
it'll
Andrew.
only return certain results. I feel like nobody knows that.
No, I didn't
I learned
know
it in
that.
college. Yay. It was great.
Thank
like,
you.
yeah, you don't always learn shit that's that useful in college, but like
phenomenal.
it was a freshman fucking English class, right? And the guy's like, "Here's how you verify information," And so, not to say that all .edus are going to be spotless, but humans aren't fucking great at like understanding what the fuck they're talking about, and that not preventing them from talking about it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
and science can be bought for sure. Like, scientists need funding,
Yeah.
right? And scientists
Big
don't
time.
always agree. But
True.
if you start with your search criteria and you kind of tend toward more reliable things like .edus,
Yeah.
then you can kind of parse out what's really going on. Scientific articles are great. They follow a specific format always, right?
Consistent.
Yeah, it's like,
Wow.
I'm not going to try to remember it, but it's like abstract, and then, which gives you a summation of it. And then it's like, materials and methods. And, I'm probably getting this wrong at some point, but it's laid out in the same way every time, because if an article has been subjected to peer review, then it should be reproducible. And so it's like a recipe at that point. So if you want to know about rooting in plants, you can Google, sort by site .edu, and then you'll find journal articles, or you can use Google Scholar, which has, will give you scholarly articles or whatever. And then also, I love telling people this. There is a website called Sci-Hub, SCI-Hub, and the dot changes because they have to like keep jumping from country to country. It was this Ukrainian scientist that fucking got sick of paywalls, like for the first world, because the first world does a lot of this research and then puts a paywall, like, right? And then the third world can't necessarily, I don't know if those terms are like acceptable anymore, but because I work in a lab and I don't like humans. So like the like that's a really a lot of places can't afford to find that, and they need the information. So this Ukrainian scientist put like 6 million fucking papers up for free on Sci-Hub. So I encourage everyone to look at that. And so if and how you search for it is the DOI number. So you find a journal article that's behind a paywall, and it'll just give you the abstract, right? And then you have to pay to get it. So a way to circumvent that is copy that DOI number, which they all have to have on them. And then you just put that into Sci-Hub's search, right? And then it'll give you that article typically. If it's not, super recent, like, it's usually like a year or two lag. But, it's provided accessibility to like, fuck me. You know what I mean? Like,
Andrew, that's
but also
awesome.
lots of people that like really need that science. Because if you're trying to grow subsistence, fucking crops, or like you're a struggling company in a different fucking country and you can't afford to like pay for that science, I think it's a great way to circumvent that process. People are probably gonna get mad at me, but like, fucking haters.
I know.
Anyway,
They're always gonna be there.
yeah, I think our don't get me started on education system in this country. But,
I just think that's so nice that you shared that though, because I think that's just, I don't know, that's just huge.
I mean, information
resource.
should be accessible, right? Like I understand things are
Yeah.
proprietary and I understand intellectual property, right? But
Definitely.
when it comes to like educational things and like research, like the world should kind of know. You know what I mean? Like I feel like it's kind of not cool to keep that shit behind a paywall because there's that excludes like de facto a ton of people.
I think that there's a lot of things. I wanted to do a show on Monsanto because so many people say that and talk about it, and they're like, I don't know, but I don't think they realize like how much of like their grow equipment they really own, and like how much of every. So then I found out Monsanto is actually owned by Bayer, and Bayer owns everything, every
Yeah.
Hershey's bar, every Coke you ever drank, every Pepsi, every anything you can imagine. Bayer owns, and they're who purchased Monsanto, and they paid an absurd amount of money in 2018. And I think if people really realized how much of this umbrella company really
Yeah.
owns everything, it's like an empire.
Yeah, so unfortunately, the ag system is pretty
So
fucked.
corrupt.
You know what I mean? And
Sorry, I was
um,
blind.
you know the way we produce enough to feed like everybody, but like half of it gets fucking
Waste.
yeah, it's waste, right? Just because of the way it's distributed and the way that kind of money controls it all, right? And so I kind of feel like people need to lean back into growing their own food to some degree. You know, like each
Yeah.
back in like fucking even like 80 years ago, people had like a kitchen garden. You know what I mean? Often like each house had or each place had a kitchen garden. There's a sorry, there's a lot of community gardens in
Oh,
Denver.
I see a
Yeah,
lot
like Denver
lately.
Urban Gardens is great. Like when I lived in an apartment building and couldn't actually have a yard, right? Like, kind of still don't have a yard. But anyway, you can get a plot there for super cheap, right? And
Really?
yeah, and you can just grow your own food, like to some degree. And so that, causes, if you need help with food, like it helps a lot. And also, if you don't have a lot of money to spend on food, then you rely heavily on processed things, right? Which
Yeah.
don't have the same nutritional content. Because, like, the water soluble, like, or not water soluble, yeah, water soluble vitamins, for example, like they, a lot of the time are cooked off in the pasteurization process, right? Or
Really?
destroyed. And so, certain things like canned don't have the same nutritive content as fresh, right? And so,
Oh, I see.
to some degree, Colorado's a cruel mistress as far as growing plants, just in general, like outdoors,
True.
even indoors, because like the
Just put her in our
temperatures.
living room. Put the light above the TV.
I personally, in a semi-arid location, don't see a lot of use for lawns, right? Like because
No,
there was a whole like movement that was like food not lawns, and
it's true.
during COVID, I fucking took about a third of my lawn and just like got rid of it, plowed it under, and fucking started growing food there. My landlord didn't think that was great, but you know what I mean? Like having a supply of fresh food
Yeah.
like improves your health a lot, and not having the ability to do that kind of puts you in the hands of those companies we were just talking about and
Big
relying
time.
on those, and so I think everybody, the ag system is probably going to have to burn at some point, right? Unfortunately, because it's just there's no equity, right? Like
Yeah.
as far as like the socioeconomic scale goes, and so yeah, I don't want to say that too loud because I don't want to become a target, but like
Yeah.
to some degree, it's a very fragile system that's very outmoded.
That's what's scary. Not what kind of. It's like we all dance around this because it's like you really have to be careful with stuff like that. But then at the same time, though, it's like everybody, I think, talking about it has the best of intentions within it. So it's like really ironic that I don't know.
I was just looking at some of the comments.
Oh gosh. Everybody
Garden
loves
Center.
when you come on, Andrew. Let's read these bad boys. I haven't got to check the chat all night. I'm sorry, guys.
Happy Guy Fawkes Day. I love that. That's gonna probably go over most people's heads though. That's something they celebrate in England, where they burn Guy Fawkes in effigy, not like the actual guy because he died a long time ago. But he tried to blow up Parliament.
Really?
Yeah, a long
Parliament?
time ago.
Parliament, like, I smoked Parliament cigarettes, so that was like the first thing that my. Oh, what's this guy's Instagram? Yeah, Andrew doesn't have Instagram.
No,
It's okay. You can.
I'm kind of an analog guy in a digital world here.
Don't you have email, Andrew?
I do.
Yeah. Can we shout out your email? Can people email you because they love you, Andrew? And we're gonna start doing some cool projects that we're not gonna say yet because it's too cool.
So do you have like a private message thing that they can do through this?
Oh yeah.
Cool. I would say anybody that wants my email, just ping her. But I hesitate to put it just
publicly
out there on the web.
DM me or email me at treeconsulting@gmail.com. And yes, because I noticed, Andrew, that so many people loved you. No, you won't, Jay. We told you to put the blinds down a while ago. It's messed up, boom. I don't know what kind of smoking my man gets the stoniest he can and never gets me the name Decent Flower.
Well, a lot of the names sometimes get fucking made up. I remember back in the 90s, I'm like, yo, I got that Mango Madness. Like, whatever it smelled like, I would just name it. And people are like, ooh, it has a name, so I'm going to fucking smoke it.
That's exactly. Even Thin Mints. There was like 40 different Thin Mints at a time. One would be purple, one would be... Anyways. In AZ, you can smell the chlorine at the tap in the hose, and you can tap when the chlorine city. Oh, you can. She's saying you can smell it when they refill the tap in Arizona with chlorine fresh.
Well, chlorine is like relatively short-lived, like off gases, right? But chloramine doesn't, and so sometimes you'll read like that you can just leave a pitcher of water out and the chlorine will disappear, and that's true. But depending on the chemistry of the local water, different water treatment plants use a mixture of chloramine and chlorine, because chlorine is short-lived, right? And will off gas, but chloramine stays there. It's not volatile.
Oh.
Yeah, so that'll be in your water report too, I think, hopefully.
It's kind of scary. I'm smoking on Analemma.
Analemma.
Thank you. From Sultan Seeds. It's nice. God, I'm just gonna give up.
No, don't do that.
Andrew, you just read these.
Yeah, so when you feed your plant candy, you get new strains of it.
This is so...
Oh, that's great. Cheers, everyone. Smoking some Cherry West, Back Cross, F2, Finger Hash. Damn. Nice.
Oh, that's a sound.
Yeah, I want to shout out my friend Brian Farrell in fucking Albuquerque. He makes excellent fucking hash. He's an organic chemist by training. He's a good friend. He's in my phone as Brian the Chemist Farrell.
That's a great name.
Quotes, right? Like, so, but he's one of the smartest people I've ever had the pleasure to work with. And he said, several years ago, like, he became such a nerd about rosin that he bought, his own freeze dryer, right, for example. Dang. And he's just really studied it, and just really fucking studied it. As only a fucking dedicated nerd will. Not can, but will. So... and he's just done excellent work with it.
You should bring him, Andrew.
Well,
I'll be on my best.
Not from Albuquerque, but we could do the online thing, right?
Think we could call.
Could use the
in.
internets, like all of them.
Yeah, we could do it. It would be great to talk to him.
Yeah, I forget what his company's name is. Like the time I remember to shout somebody out, but. Yeah, I'll come back with that next time.
I was going to say, we're going to see you very soon. I'm just going to force Andrew to come back all the time. Be like, Andrew. Okay. Andrew, can you see these with my phone? I've been known to have a Jimmy Neutron head. Is what I was told.
I think it's the hair. I don't know. That's genetics.
Oh,
Mushrooms on the Lost Boys Bridge. Without context. Oh wait, yeah. Oh yeah. Okay, now I remember. The Lost Boys. So, Lost Boys. Do you remember that movie, Vampires?
oh no. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I'm trying to think. Lost Boys, I think
the
is
younger
something.
generations. Damn. No. So no, it's a great. The Lost Boys is a great vampire movie.
Really?
Came out a long time ago, but there's a scene in the bridge where like, this guy that's new to hanging out with the vampires, he doesn't know they're vampires yet, and like they just start dropping off the bridge and into the mist. And like
That's
they
creepy.
can fly, right? Or I
Vampires
suppose
can
I've never
fly.
met one, but yeah, mushrooms on the Lost Boys Bridge. Holy shit, new levels. I'll stick to doing mushrooms when I find a time to do them. Maybe this weekend. Yeah, you definitely want to have your scene, your setting fucking correct. Like if you're gonna go deep, for sure.
I feel like if you're gonna go deep, that's hilarious.
Yeah, I've been a psychedelic voyager at times.
I mean, sometimes you just think you're gonna go settle, and then you're like, "Oh shit, here we
Yeah,
are."
back in the '90s, I accidentally ate some raw, and like it's probably like 300 to 500 hits, and like it was. It got worse before it got better. I'll put it that way. I was just like, it was like being on a rocket for fucking 24 hours. I just kept getting, like, and afterwards it was like snowing because it was snowing that night, and then afterwards it was snowing everywhere I looked for like a few weeks. And that was the last time I did acid. It was like 1999 because
Really?
I'd reached what I needed to reach with it at that point.
I did with that with Ella as well. Like
Yeah.
where I went like too deep. Sometimes I'm like, God, I'd be so much smarter if I didn't do all of these things. Sometimes,
Well, I don't know, but you also wouldn't be the person you are.
Ah.
And about half the time, I like who I am.
Aw, Andrew, you're 100% incredible guy. You just
50% of the time.
Oh, dog pounds, thank you. I feel like I really let you guys down tonight. Andrew, you guys all hanging in with me.
Oh shit! Okay. So last time I was on, we talked about carbon,
Yes.
right,
Let's
and
do
carbon
this.
nutrients.
Yep.
So I gotta own a couple things. One, it's not 90% of the photosynthetates that are put out in the root zone. It's around 40%. But if you've got a way to, plant roots can actually take up simple sugars, and if you've got a chelating agent that's not, like an amino acid, for example, that's not like a chemical that's going to build up in the plant. Then yeah, they can produce net biomass gain because it's not putting out that 40%. It's actually uptaking enough to offset that. It's still going to put out the 40% just because that's what they're genetically programmed to do, and that feeds the microflora and in the rhizosphere, which is like that, about a millimeter outside of the root. And so that's what they call the rhizosphere. I just make it up. But.
I love that you say this. Is I wanted to make a little chart of like a plant image for reals. You should do this with me, Andrew.
Okay.
Is like to do a chart on the screen one night and break down a plant and make it where people can take a screenshot, because I know people like there's stuff on YouTube and like information like that, but they really don't expand. Like if you're really interested into the in this to the depths of like not just cannabis, but like how a plant's really working and how they're really consuming everything, like in every different component of it. I think it'd be cool if like we did a diagram and physically, and then you could talk about it and all these words I can't pronounce and a lot of people can't pronounce. Is like I want to try to put it all together in an episode so that we can hit on all these things that everybody's like, shit, can I say this? Can I not say this? But I want to take as many words as I can. So if you guys have any recommendations, obviously I have a lot. But I feel, don't you think it'd be cool?
Totally, except I mean, it's like, how big a screen do we have? You know what I mean? Because you've got a plant, right? I'm not asking a literal question, but like plants, you can do like a simple overview, right?
Yeah.
But like it's super complicated. The more, how in depth do
Complex.
you want to go? So we could do like a 3 hour episode that just covered like baseline plant biology, the different parts of the plant, the different tissues, what they can and can't do.
That's what I'm talking about. I want to go as deep as we can because I think if we have the beds, like because people really do love and appreciate living soil and
Hmm.
the concept of this working, I think it would be cool to really break this down with like when you're introducing these types of insects, even when you're not treating, what you're jeopardizing with that
Yeah.
as well. Or putting your plant in a susceptible spot for X amount of weeks and like how you need to navigate. Anyway, not that with that episode, but I feel like when these things get interrupted, like the actual uptake or the flushing, like if your plant's not eating, it's not going to flush out anything either. If you have this,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know, taproot issues. Sorry, Andrew.
Yeah, it's all good. It's just hot a little bit.
It's yeah, if you get a little taproot issue going on though, these are the things that I think people need to be able to
Yeah, like for
identify.
example, like clones don't produce taproots.
I love
Like only seeds produce taproots because the seed anatomy, they got a radical, and that's where the taproot comes from. And so like all other, when you're cloning a plant, it's just a different kind of root.
yeah. I feel we need to do this, guys. Let us know.
Also with autoflowers,
Yeah.
like when you're
Ooh.
growing from seed, which is the only way to grow, so I don't know why I said that. But autoflowers, if that taproot hits something, they'll
Yeah.
just start to flower. So a lot of people are like, "Oh, the yield sucked," but you have to have, fine tilth, like fine grain media with no obstructions. Basically, they can hit a stone and they'll just start to flower.
I just love that you bring up the things once again that you bring up because everybody fucks up their first round doing autoflowers because of that very reason. It's like the plant or the pot that you put that plant in is the pot
The
it's
final
going to
pot,
stay
yeah,
in.
totally. You don't want to put them in seed cubes, and then you're like, "Oh, wow, I've got a bunch of 6-inch plants that are flowering."
I'd say that's the biggest like hurdle of getting through your first like if there's a trick or a tip that somebody could have told me the first time or told or shared, that's like strong information though.
Yeah, I figured out a way to make autoflowers fucking huge. Um, I
Ooh.
gotta remember what it was. Oh yeah, and like I'm not interested anymore in commercializing this, so I'll just put it out there. So plant them in a pot that's big enough for enough root growth, but then also you can fill them in with more at a later stage, and they'll grow additional roots. And my theory is that it offsets the hormone balance, but it'll like delay flowering to some degree. I tried this in my garage, like I do most things.
It's the best place.
Yeah, and so it was relatively limited population size, but the fucking plants were like much bigger.
Damn.
Um,
Couldn't you put like a net one too? Like in theory, couldn't you like almost like when you put rock wool like blocks on slabs?
mhm.
Is like couldn't you with an autoflower pot in theory is like take the pot and have it like almost a mesh like pot instead of a plastic or something and like take that and put that on top of another pot?
I suppose.
I don't know. I was
Yeah,
just
I
thinking
don't
that
know.
while
Yeah,
we were saying that.
how I did it, I just was like tomatoes, like because that's what I do with
Oh.
tomatoes. Like I always like strip off because they're like they'll produce roots all along the stem, and so I just strip off all the fucking leaves and then bury them like up to their neck, right? And that gives you huge plants.
No way.
Yeah, for sure. You just got leave a little bit of time for the wounds on the plant to heal, so you're not inviting like soil pests to come in and wreak havoc, but or sorry, pathogens.
Almost scab over just a couple days or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, last like a day.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah.
Look, you need to do this, Andrew.
Yeah.
Well,
I grow plants good.
Andrew's plants are phenomenal. That was the thing I was gonna post tonight, and I'm so sorry, guys. I will post it on the channel after this. I needed to send it before the show, and I apologize, but we will post it. Andrew has a beautiful plant that I will have Andrew describe, but
Yeah, it's like I think 5 different plants, different species on like with a cork tree in the middle. It's like a 14-inch pot. I've been working on it for like 20 months. And
Gorgeous.
yeah, and so it's got philodendron melanochrysum, philodendron pink princess, rabbitfoot ferns. I don't remember what they're called. Asparagus ferns. Like they're actually kind of asparagus. They're not like actually ferns, but growing out of like crooks in the tree. And then it's got
The pink princess looks stunning.
thank you. And it's got a couple like a couple blooming orchids like coming off that are mounted on the on the cork or whatever. They just went into bloom, but they've been on there for a while. Yeah, it's fun making these things, but it's kind of like bonsai. It's like a labor of love that requires kind of attention. But now that one is like to the point where you just water it.
Where she's like vigorous enough and
Yeah, totally.
hardy enough.
But building them so that they don't like, die, and understanding the materials to put together is
Keeping that
It takes some
medium
time.
just right, resilient enough.
yeah. Well, like
Dry enough.
understanding like what is going to compact and what like orchids will root to and like what won't fucking turn into like brown slush after you fucking keep it wet for a while. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a lot of kind of different things that go into it, but I find it really fun because I like systems. Like,
Wow. Well, Andrew's willing to let me post her up for sale, and I've never seen Andrew be willing to part with such a beauty. But I think we're gonna post her. And what do you
Cool.
think, Andrew?
oh, I'm cool with it.
He's just sharing the love because she's just stunning. So everybody, we love Andrew and appreciate Andrew so much. So I will post this and I'll post it on the gram over the next couple days. You guys can check her out. Andrew doesn't have the gram like we said, so DM me or comment or
Maybe
anything.
I need to have one. I don't know. Like,
Yeah, we should make
I
you
don't
a
really
gram.
know what humans do. Probably as evidenced by the fact I call them humans.
I think you could fall down a deep hole if you fall into Instagram for the first time.
Yeah, and
but-
I've actually fallen into deep literal holes, and so I'm not trying to do that.
Well, if you need an Instagram manager.
I need an Instagram first.
Just kidding.
Yeah,
Well,
I don't really like social media that much, just because it's, for one,
it's terrible.
also, yeah, it's like the data, right? Like, data is valuable, and data can be exploited. And so, like, imagine World War II, for example. Like,
Yeah.
if Hitler had access to Facebook, right? Like, yeah,
Oh my
bad shit.
gosh.
Would have known people that what they
Bloody
what they do,
Mary.
where they go. And so I'm not a big fan of social media, but I should probably learn how to use it. I had a Facebook. I guess I still do have a Facebook floating around there. Yeah, but that's about it. I had to start it like for business, and then, but I don't like to post anything that's personal to me on there, because like I grew up in a different era, and so like I want to tell you about it if like face to face typically, or on the phone, like. If you're important to me, I don't want to post it for the world to see just to do it. You know what I'm saying?
If you have any questions for Andrew in any way, you let me know. We'll get you in touch with Andrew because he is mysteriously off the map, as you hear. But he's
Off the
also a
rocker.
social butterfly in other ways.
Yeah, for sure. I do like going into a room full of people and like walking around talking to them. I like people on a personal level. This is not.
Care about.
I'm not some like complete misanthrope. Like I just like whenever human beings gather in large enough populations, wealth stratifies, and we always do the same shit.
I love this. Once again.
But like on a personal basis, yeah, I'm fairly gregarious. I like walk around. I like people. You know what I mean? Like people are fucking beautiful. Like, but like humans as a species, when they get in large groups, it goes kind of sideways.
Yeah, I feel like that's a struggle. It's a struggle for everybody lately, I think. It's like people, it's weird. We like everybody in distant ways. We do like everybody that we don't know. Like this like idea of somebody in this like weird painting.
It's superficial.
Very
yeah, like
superficial.
at the superficial level, like
Yes.
yeah,
And like, ugh.
But then you
discouraging.
know somebody like so, and also people only reveal of themselves like what they want you to see to some degree. There's always,
I
you
always
know,
want people to know that. It's like I've hung out with these like famous people, right? Like or these Instagram famous people that like, you know, have like 1 million followers or something like that. And it sounds weird because like a lot of followers or something. But I think
yeah, you follow me, I'm gonna fuck you up.
it's crazy
No, I'm
too
just
because I'm
kidding.
just like, dude, if we go into a Walmart though, like nobody's gonna know who this person is.
Yeah.
Like these followers only apply in these really specific rooms of people. I'm not discounting anybody's like, you know.
Yeah,
Like,
totally,
keep on, keep
totally. Like
on.
I don't know much about it. I was just making a joke about
No,
if you're actually following me like behind me. I'm like, yeah, I'll
that's
fuck you up.
hilarious. Anyways, Andrew, it was such a pleasure as always. I think we should have you on very soon
Yeah,
again.
I'll be back for
Yeah.
sure.
And Andrew's got some big stuff coming up too.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I get bored easy, and so I'm never bored.
Well, Andrew, I think we're gonna call it a night. What do you think?
All right.
All right. Peace and love, everybody. And thank you for watching. We'll be in next Sunday.